Queen Victoria's rise, from prisoner to queen, assassin's bullets, a lonely childhood, a royal destiny, the astonishing journey of young Victoria. How does a lonely, fatherless child raised in isolation rise to become the ruler of the most powerful empire the world has ever seen? What drove the young Queen Victoria to break free from her suffocating childhood to lead with boldness and determination? And why did fate and an assassin's bullet seem so determined to target her reign at every turn? This is not just the story of a queen, it's the tale of a monarchy teetering on the brink of chaos, a scramble for an heir that led to a forgotten girl, and her unlikely transformation into the steadfast icon of an age. But let's not rush ahead. Picture this: a young Victoria dashing, quite literally, to escape her controlling mother's grip, her first steps toward freedom shadowed by the looming threat of an assassin's aim. What decisions shaped her destiny, and what was the secret weapon behind her unshakable rise? Grab your tea or a crown, because the answers are as riveting as they are unexpected. Let's rewind to May 24, 1819. Picture Kensington Palace, not the sprawling tourist attraction it is today, but a somewhat drafty royal residence nestled in the heart of London. It's 4:14 a.m., and in the dining room, yes, the dining room, a child is born. Why the dining room, you ask? Surely, there were grander spaces in a royal palace. Well, practicality won the day. The dining room was conveniently close to the kitchen, ensuring a ready supply of hot water. This odd choice of birthplace would become one of many charming quirks in the life of Alexandrina Victoria, the girl destined to reshape British history. The newborn princess's names were a tribute to her lineage: Alexandrina for her godfather, the formidable Tsar Alexander I of Russia, and Victoria in honor of her mother, Princess Victoria of Saxe-Coburg-Saalfeld. But no one at the time thought this baby would amount to much. After all, she was fifth in line to the throne, behind her father, uncles, and their potential offspring. Little did they know, fate was about to play a hand even Shakespeare couldn't script. Picture the British royal family in the early 19th century, a soap opera cast on steroids. At the head of this glorious mess was King George III, known to history for two things: losing America and bouts of madness so legendary they inspired Hollywood. His descendants, however, were determined to outshine him in scandal. By the time Victoria was born in 1819, the House of Hanover was embroiled in a race to produce a legitimate heir. A race more chaotic than a toddler's birthday party. George III's eldest son, George IV, was ruling as Prince Regent because dear old dad was, well, mentally unavailable. George IV himself was a train wreck in ermine robes. His marriage to Caroline of Brunswick had more drama than a reality TV reunion, culminating in a single child, Princess Charlotte. But Charlotte's untimely death in childbirth in 1817 left the monarchy in a crisis. George's younger brothers weren't much better. Frederick, the Duke of York, was childless. William, the Duke of Clarence, tried to patch things up by marrying Princess Adelaide, but their union only produced heartbreak and no surviving heirs. This left Edward, Duke of Kent, the fourth son, who had spent most of his life without a care in the world, or a legitimate child. Enter Edward, who reluctantly joined the dynastic baby race like a last-minute contestant on a game show. In 1818, he married Princess Victoria of Saxe-Coburg-Saalfeld, a charming German widow with 2 children from her first marriage. Romantic? Hardly. This was a business deal, sealed over political necessities and polite handshakes. But Edward got the job done, and in May 1819, their daughter, Alexandrina Victoria, was born. Little Victoria was fifth in line to the throne, hardly a likely heir. Her birth barely caused a ripple in royal circles. But fate, as it turns out, had a wicked sense of humor. Just when Edward looked like he might secure the family line, disaster struck. In January 1820, 8 months after Victoria's birth, Edward caught pneumonia during a bitter winter and died. With his passing, the Duchess of Kent was left to navigate British court politics as a widowed foreigner, an unenviable position akin to swimming in shark-infested waters. Adding insult to injury, Edward left behind mountains of debt. The Duchess and baby Victoria were forced into a precarious existence, reliant on handouts from the very royal family that viewed them as outsiders. Into this power vacuum stepped Sir John Conroy, a former military man with ambitions larger than Buckingham Palace. Conroy became the Duchess's confidant, financial advisor, and de facto co-parent. Together, they devised the Kensington system, a suffocating set of rules designed to keep Victoria isolated, controlled, and utterly dependent on them. The Kensington system was as much a prison as it was a system. Victoria wasn't allowed to sleep alone, play unsupervised, or even descend the palace stairs without holding someone's hand. If a pigeon flew past the window, it probably had to file a clearance request. Conroy's ultimate goal was to manipulate Victoria into granting him political power once she ascended the throne. Victoria's childhood could be summed up as melancholy with a side of despair. Her days were meticulously scheduled, filled with lessons in languages, drawing, and music. She learned French, German, Italian, and Latin, which is impressive considering she barely learned to trust anyone. Her sole joys were her governess, Baroness Lesson, and her dog Dash, for whom she once had custom trousers made. Yes, really, Dash wore pants. But the isolation backfired. Victoria grew increasingly resentful of Conroy and her mother, especially as she neared adulthood. Far from breaking her spirit, the Kensington system steeled her will. She began to develop a sharp sense of independence, biding her time until she could escape the web Conroy had spun. Meanwhile, the throne continued its game of musical chairs. George IV's reign ended in 1830, making way for William IV. William, despite his best efforts, failed to produce a surviving heir. By the time Victoria turned 11, she was suddenly second in line. King William IV, no fan of the Duchess or Conroy, openly expressed his wish to live long enough for Victoria to reach her majority age. He detested the idea of the Duchess acting as regent and saw Conroy as a conniving interloper. His dying wish, whispered to anyone who would listen, was to spare the country from their control. In the early hours of June 20th, 1837, an 18-year-old Princess Victoria lay asleep in Kensington Palace, unaware her life was about to change forever. Her world had long been confined by the oppressive Kensington system, a set of strict rules devised by her controlling mother, the Duchess of Kent, and her mother's ambitious advisor, Sir John Conroy. Victoria had lived a sheltered existence, monitored constantly, forbidden friends, and even shared her mother's bedroom, a royal setup so suffocating it would make Rapunzel's tower seem spacious. But destiny had other plans. At 6 a.m., Victoria was rudely awakened by a knock at her door. She hurriedly wrapped herself in her dressing gown and descended the staircase, a little groggy but curious. Standing before her were unexpected visitors. Chief among them was Lord Conyngham, the Lord Chamberlain, flanked by the Archbishop of Canterbury. Their grave expressions hinted at the gravity of the news they bore. "Your uncle, King William IV, passed away at 2:12 a.m., Conyngham announced solemnly. "You are now Queen of the United Kingdom." Victoria, still in her nightclothes and barely out of her teens, was momentarily stunned. But she quickly collected herself and did something remarkable. She received them alone. For the first time in her life, her mother and Conroy were not hovering by her side, interfering. That simple act of independence was her first step toward a reign defined by resilience and self-possession. Victoria's first royal act, she ordered her bed removed from her mother's bedroom. "I think we're done sharing, Mother," she might have quipped with a wry smile. Conroy, the ever-scheming opportunist, hoped to secure a position of power in her court. Victoria, however, dismissed him without ceremony, effectively exiling him from her inner circle. "Goodbye, Sir John. Don't let the door hit you on the way out," she seemed to say through her actions. That same day, Victoria dressed in mourning black to honor her uncle and made her first public appearance as queen. She stepped into the spotlight alone, free from her mother's shadow. The public immediately took notice of her petite frame, just 5'1", but also of her commanding presence. The 97 cabinet ministers and officials gathered in Kensington Palace's Red Saloon for the Accession Council couldn't help but be impressed. The Duke of Wellington later remarked that although she was small in stature, Victoria had filled the room. She wasn't just sitting on the throne, she owned it. Flushed with success, Victoria moved to Buckingham Palace, making it her primary residence and a symbol of her newfound independence. She installed her mother in a distant wing, far enough away to ensure privacy, and later moved her to Belgrave Square, a polite exile disguised as accommodation. As for Conroy, he was gone for good. In contrast, Victoria invited her beloved former governess, Baroness Louise Lesson, to live with her, solidifying a support network she could trust. Victoria's confidence continued to grow, but when her coronation day arrived on June 28, 1838, she admitted to being nervous. "What if I trip on my gown?" she probably mused to herself. The streets of London, however, were bursting with excitement. Thousands of cheering subjects lined the roads, waving and shouting as Victoria's carriage passed. In her diary, she later wrote, "How proud I felt to be queen of such a nation." The ceremony itself, however, was less than perfect. The Bishop of Durham fumbled his lines, accidentally calling the event to an end prematurely, much to the confusion of the congregation. An elderly peer took an unfortunate tumble, and the coronation ring was placed on the wrong finger, leaving Victoria wincing in pain. Despite these mishaps, the public was ecstatic. Fireworks lit up Hyde Park, theaters across London offered free admission, and the people celebrated with unparalleled joy. For the young queen, the cheering crowds erased her nerves and cemented her bond with her subjects. Victoria's early reign carried an air of optimism. Her youth and distance from her unpopular predecessors, like her extravagant uncles, encouraged a rosy view of the monarchy. However, not everyone was impressed. Due to ancient Salic law, which barred women from inheriting the throne of Hanover, Victoria was excluded from ruling the German kingdom her predecessors had controlled. Instead, that dubious honor fell to her father's unpopular younger brother, Ernest Augustus, Duke of Cumberland, a man so disliked that even the Hanoverians groaned at his ascension. Meanwhile, Victoria faced the challenge of proving herself in a world skeptical of her gender and youth. Her determination to succeed shone through in her diary. "I shall do my utmost to fulfill my duty towards my country. I am very young, but I am sure that very few have more real goodwill and more real desire to do what is fit and right than I have." Victoria's early reliance on her Prime Minister, Lord Melbourne, led to whispers of impropriety. Melbourne, a widowed 58-year-old, was not just a political mentor, but also a confidant and father figure to the young queen. Their close relationship fueled rumors of a secret romance, though most historians agree the bond was platonic. Aristocrat Charles Greville noted that Melbourne was passionately fond of her in a paternal sense, but public speculation was relentless. The court intrigue didn't end there. In 1839, a scandal erupted involving Lady Flora Hastings, a lady-in-waiting to Victoria's mother. Rumors swirled that Lady Flora was pregnant with an illegitimate child, possibly by none other than Conroy. Victoria, harboring deep resentment toward her mother and Conroy, believed the gossip. Lady Flora reluctantly underwent a medical examination, which confirmed she was a virgin. Tragically, the pregnancy turned out to be a terminal liver tumor. Her death intensified public sympathy, and Victoria was hissed at during public appearances. Hot on the heels of this debacle came the bedchamber crisis. When Melbourne resigned, Tory leader Sir Robert Peel attempted to form a government. Peel requested that Victoria replace her Whig-aligned ladies of the bedchamber with Tory counterparts, but Victoria refused. Her defiance led to a political standoff, forcing Melbourne to return as Prime Minister. Critics questioned her ability to remain above politics, but Victoria held her ground. Amidst these challenges, Victoria's life took a romantic turn. She had first met Prince Albert of Saxe-Coburg and Gotha, her first cousin, in 1836. Their families had long envisioned a union, but Victoria, then a spirited teenager, wasn't ready for marriage. By 1839, however, she had matured and saw Albert in a new light. Describing him as extremely handsome, with a most delightful countenance, she proposed to him, as royal protocol demanded, on October 15, 1839. Their wedding, held on February 10, 1840, was a dazzling affair. Victoria wore a white satin gown adorned with orange blossoms, a departure from royal robes, setting a trend that brides still follow today. Albert, dressed as a British field marshal, radiated charm. Their public carriage ride and joyful celebration marked the beginning of a love match that would shape the monarchy for decades. In the heart of 19th century England, Queen Victoria and her consort, Prince Albert, lived out a marriage that was both deeply traditional and yet surprisingly modern. Both staunch believers in the Victorian ideal of male dominance in marriage, Albert and Victoria didn't quite live up to the textbook definition of those roles. While Albert certainly took charge in many areas, he also proved to be a devoted husband in ways that made even their closest confidants raise their eyebrows. Their first test of this unorthodox partnership came in 1840 with Victoria's pregnancy. Like many a mother-to-be, Victoria was no stranger to nausea, fatigue, and bouts of grumpiness, though her grumpiness, being that of a queen, could spark a diplomatic crisis. Albert, unfazed, supported her with remarkable tenderness. When she was too unwell to rise, he would sit by her bedside, reading government dispatches aloud, deftly juggling statecraft and lullabies. The image of this towering German prince, patiently delivering updates about grain prices while the Queen nibbled on biscuits, set the tone for their marriage, a partnership of equals, even when one was bedridden. Their shared workspace at Buckingham Palace, 2 desks side by side, symbolized this collaboration. By the time Victoria reached the later stages of her pregnancy, Albert had effectively become her private secretary, managing correspondence and even helping with state decisions, allowing Victoria to shift her focus to her growing family. In June 1840, while en route to visit Victoria's estranged mother, the Duchess of Kent, the royal couple encountered a far less familial figure, Edward Oxford, an 18-year-old who would etch his name into infamy. As their carriage rolled through London, Oxford, armed with a pair of pistols, fired twice at the young queen. Or so he thought. Either the bullets missed, or the guns weren't loaded, as Oxford later claimed in his trial. The attempt, though utterly botched, sent shockwaves through the nation. He was swiftly subdued and tried for high treason, only to be found not guilty by reason of insanity, a verdict that both relieved and frustrated the public. He was confined to an asylum before being deported to Australia, where he presumably spent his days contemplating his dubious marksmanship. Despite the chaos, Victoria emerged from the ordeal with her popularity soaring. The assassination attempt, dramatic as it was, made the Queen more relatable to her subjects, who rallied around her with newfound loyalty. The political crises that had dogged her early reign, the Hastings affair and the bedchamber crisis, faded into the background. Unfortunately, Oxford's bungled attempt seemed to inspire a troubling trend. The Queen became a magnet for assassins, most of whom were either lunatics or hapless opportunists. 1842, John Francis, a disgruntled carpenter's son, fired at Victoria as she rode along the Mall. This time the police devised a cunning plan to lure him out. On May 30th, Victoria bravely rode the same route again, serving as live bait. Sure enough, Francis took the bait and was promptly captured, earning himself a death sentence, later commuted to transportation. 1849, Irishman William Hamilton took a shot, ostensibly to protest British policies in Ireland. Luckily, his gun was loaded with nothing but wads of paper. He was arrested, tried, and sentenced to 7 years of exile. 1850, ex-soldier Robert Pate attacked Victoria in broad daylight, striking her with a cane. Though she escaped serious injury, the audacity of the act shocked the public. Pate was exiled to Australia, proving that the British Empire's penal colonies were quite the gathering place for failed regicides. 1872, Arthur O'Connor, a 17-year-old Irishman, attempted to confront Victoria with a pistol, hoping to draw attention to Irish grievances. He was overpowered by John Brown, the Queen's loyal servant, and sent to prison. 1882, Roderick MacLean fired at Victoria as she disembarked a train, missing her entirely. He, like Oxford, was found insane and committed to an asylum. While dodging bullets became something of a hobby, Victoria's true legacy lay in her family. Her first child, Princess Victoria Vicky, was born in 1840, much to her parents' delight. However, the Queen's pregnancies were far from smooth. She suffered from severe postnatal depression and loathed breastfeeding, a sentiment she did not hesitate to express. By her 8th and 9th pregnancies, Victoria had championed the use of chloroform for pain relief, defying both clergy and cautious doctors. Her boldness paved the way for broader acceptance of anesthesia. Victoria and Albert's brood eventually included 9 children: Vicky, Bertie, the future Edward VII, Alice, Alfred, Helena, Louise, Arthur, Leopold, and Beatrice. The royal couple took an unusually hands-on approach to parenting. Albert, in particular, relished his role, playing and romping with the children in ways that scandalized aristocratic norms. Victoria fondly documented these moments in her diary, marveling at her husband's bond with their offspring. Albert also introduced festive traditions that became hallmarks of the Victorian era, including the Christmas tree. The royal family's domestic bliss, captured in new illustrated newspapers, became a powerful symbol of moral and family values, endearing Victoria to a burgeoning middle class. Albert's influence extended far beyond fatherhood. Granted the title of His Royal Highness Prince Consort in 1857, he became an indispensable partner in Victoria's reign. His strategic mind and political acumen helped shape policies, while his quiet strength guided the Queen through personal and political storms. After the death of Lord Melbourne in 1842, Victoria leaned entirely on Albert, even sending her beloved confidant Baroness Lazen back to Germany at his insistence. Charles Greville, a contemporary observer, summed it up best. They are one person. He likes and she dislikes business. Together, Victoria and Albert forged a monarchy that was both relatable and revered, laying the foundation for a legacy that continues to resonate. The year was 1847, and Ireland's cries of anguish reverberated across the British Isles. The Great Famine had unleashed a torrent of death and despair, reducing Ireland's green pastures to a macabre tableau of hunger and emaciation. Over 1 million people perished, and another 1 million fled their homeland, scattered like leaves before a storm. Amidst the devastation, all eyes turned to Queen Victoria. For many in Ireland, Victoria became the symbol of British indifference, a monarch seemingly unmoved by the agony of her Irish subjects. Critics labeled her the Famine Queen, a title steeped in bitterness. Yet history, as it often does, tells a more nuanced tale. Victoria, despite the narrative of cold indifference, donated £2,000 of her personal fortune to the British Relief Association, the largest single donation from any individual at the time. To modern ears, that might not sound earth-shattering, but in today's money, it equates to several £1,000,000, a sum that could rebuild lives. She even supported the repeal of the Corn Laws, an economic stranglehold keeping grain prices high and condemning countless Irish families to starvation. It was a daring stance, one that put her at odds with her Protestant advisors and the landed gentry. Victoria also advocated for increased funding to St. Patrick's College in Maynooth, a Catholic seminary desperately in need of repair. Her efforts, however, were overshadowed by cruel rumors. Stories spread that she had donated a meager £5 to Irish Relief, while giving the same amount to Battersea Dogs Home. Though baseless, the tale caught fire, further tarnishing her reputation in Ireland. In 1849, as the famine ebbed, Victoria and Albert visited Ireland. The Queen, resplendent in hope, was met with crowds that cheered rather than jeered. For a fleeting moment, it seemed her goodwill might heal the wounds of mistrust. Yet the scars of the famine ran too deep, and Irish nationalism swelled in the shadows of her visit. While Ireland grappled with famine, Victoria and Albert turned their attention to fostering peace across Europe. Through Albert's Coburg lineage, the Queen was linked to the French royal family, specifically King Louis Philippe of the House of Orléans. In 1843 and 1845, Victoria became the first British monarch since Henry VIII to visit a French sovereign, a feat that caused gasps of astonishment across diplomatic circles. The visits were a triumph of soft diplomacy, complete with elegant soirees and royal banquets. Louis Philippe returned the favor in 1844, becoming the first French monarch to set foot on English soil in over 300 years. But fate, that trickster, had other plans. In 1848, revolution swept across Europe like wildfire, toppling Louis Philippe from his throne. Seeking refuge, he arrived on Victoria's doorstep, a deposed king now exiled on British soil. Albert, ever the visionary, turned his focus to celebrating innovation and unity. The result was the Great Exhibition of 1851, housed in the glittering Crystal Palace, a marvel of steel and glass that seemed plucked from the imagination of a science fiction writer. Over 100,000 exhibits from around the world showcased the wonders of technology, industry, and art. Even the infamous Kohinoor diamond, pried from India's crown jewels, glittered under the gaze of millions. Albert was meticulous, pricing tickets to ensure accessibility for all. A 1 shilling ticket allowed even the humblest of workers to experience this spectacle. Victoria herself was enchanted, attending nearly every day for 3 months. The exhibition was not just a triumph of progress, but a testament to Albert's belief in the power of unity. In 1858, Albert's ambitions for a liberal Europe took a deeply personal turn. His eldest daughter, Princess Victoria, Vicky, to the family, married Prince Frederick Wilhelm of Prussia. At just 17, Vicky was thrown into the heart of a deeply conservative court, where her British ideals clashed with Prussian traditions. Albert, who had meticulously educated her, hoped she would inspire Prussia to adopt a constitutional monarchy akin to Britain's. Albert, brilliant though he was, had miscalculated. Prussia's conservative elites, led by the shrewd and unyielding Otto von Bismarck, viewed Vicky with suspicion and disdain. Her British manners and liberal ideals made her an outsider, and she was often ostracized by the Hohenzollern court. As tensions between Britain and Germany deepened, Vicky became a tragic figure, a woman torn between 2 nations. Victoria and Albert's 9 children became Europe's web of alliances, marrying into nearly every major royal house. Their influence was so vast that Victoria earned the nickname the Grandmother of Europe. Yet, the family's legacy was not without its shadows. Hemophilia, the genetic disease carried by Victoria, spread through her descendants, wreaking havoc most notably on the Russian royal family. Their youngest son, Leopold, inherited the condition and died young, leaving behind a heartbroken family. Even more tragic was the plight of Alexei, the son of Victoria's granddaughter Alexandra, and Tsar Nicholas II. His hemophilia became a symbol of the Romanovs' vulnerability, exploited by mystics like Rasputin and contributing to the dynasty's downfall. Victoria's life was never ordinary, and her reign was marked by triumphs, tragedies, and the kind of drama that would give any Netflix royal series a run for its money. Born in 1819, Alexandrina Victoria ascended the throne at the tender age of 18. But let's jump into the heart of her story. Her life after the greatest love she ever knew, Prince Albert, left her side forever. In 1861, the world of the mighty queen was shattered when Albert, her beloved husband, fell ill. Typhoid fever claimed him at the young age of 42. Their 9th child, little Beatrice, was just 4 years old, far too young to understand the magnitude of the loss. For Victoria, the devastation was complete. "My life as a happy one is ended," she confided in her uncle Leopold. Her grief was not the stiff upper lip kind. It was the sort of consuming sorrow that rewrote the Queen's public image and private life. For the rest of her days, Victoria would wear black, forsaking the glamour of her royal wardrobe. Her jewelry became somber, and her public appearances dwindled. The Widow of Windsor, as the press dubbed her, withdrew into her residences, Balmoral, Osborne House, and Windsor Castle, avoiding the gaze of her subjects. Her seclusion fueled rumors, discontent, and even whispers that the monarchy might be abolished. Victoria's grief transformed her into a fiercely possessive mother. With Albert gone, her children bore the brunt of her need for control. Princess Beatrice, her youngest, became her emotional lifeline. Victoria rejected every suitor who showed interest in Beatrice, refusing to let her daughter leave her side. By the time Beatrice was 27, Victoria's grip was as strong as ever, until at a family wedding, Beatrice met her match in the dashing Prince Henry of Battenberg. The Queen was livid. 8 long months of frosty silence followed. But even the indomitable Victoria could be worn down. She agreed to the match under one ironclad condition. Beatrice and Henry would live with her in Britain. The Queen was now mother-in-law and roommate, all rolled into one. Beatrice's daughter, Victoria Eugenie, would later marry into the Spanish royal family, introducing hemophilia, a disease that had plagued the Queen's lineage, into yet another European dynasty. It was an unintended but grim reminder of Victoria and Albert's grand project, using their 9 children and 42 grandchildren to create a web of alliances across Europe. Their vision for peace through familial ties failed spectacularly. By 1914, Victoria's descendants were at war, with her grandsons, George V of Britain, Wilhelm II of Germany, and Nicholas II of Russia, on opposing sides. Albert's death was not the first tragedy of that year. Earlier, Victoria's mother, the Duchess of Kent, passed away. Their relationship had been strained, but discovering her mother's letters revealed the depth of her love. Grieving both losses, Victoria spiraled further into isolation, her mental health deteriorating. Doctors feared for her sanity, but Victoria, ever the survivor, found solace in unexpected friendships. John Brown, her gruff Highland servant, became a rock for the grieving queen. Their closeness scandalized the court and inspired rumors of a secret marriage. But Victoria, immune to gossip, valued Brown for treating her as a woman, not just a sovereign. Later in life, another unlikely confidant emerged, Abdul Karim, an Indian servant who became her Munshi teacher. He taught her Urdu and deepened her fascination with India, solidifying her image as Empress of India, a title officially bestowed in 1876. Victoria's reign saw Britain's empire reach unprecedented heights, covering a fifth of the globe. While wars raged in distant lands, from Afghanistan to Africa, Victoria's passion for expansionism remained unwavering. She was a firm believer in Britain's civilizing mission and deeply approved of Prime Minister Disraeli's imperial policies. Yet, she was not blind to the costs. Her sympathy for deposed Indian rulers, like the Maharaj Duleep Singh, added a layer of complexity to her imperialist stance. By the 1880s, Victoria's public image was in tatters, but her family and Prime Minister Disraeli convinced her to re-enter public life. Her Golden Jubilee in 1887 and Diamond Jubilee in 1897 restored her to the hearts of her subjects. The sight of the aging queen smiling from her carriage during her Diamond Jubilee procession was a rare and cherished moment. She had transformed from a reclusive widow to the grandmother of Europe, embodying the stability and strength of the era that bore her name. Victoria's later years were marked by physical decline. She suffered from osteoarthritis, her spine curved into a dowager's hump, and she relied on a wheelchair. Personal tragedies struck again. Her son Alfred and beloved grandson Christian Victor both died in 1900, leaving the queen visibly diminished. Yet she continued writing in her diary until her strength gave out. On January 22, 1901, surrounded by family, including her grandson Kaiser Wilhelm II, Victoria passed away at Osborne House. She was laid to rest beside Albert in the Royal Mausoleum at Frogmore, her final resting place adorned with the poignant words she had chosen. "Farewell, best beloved. Here at last I shall rest with thee." Queen Victoria's reign was a kaleidoscope of love, loss, power, and progress. She began as a hesitant teenager and ended as the symbol of an age. Even in death, her legacy loomed large, proving that while she may not have believed women were the best leaders, she had unquestionably redefined what it meant to be a queen. If you enjoyed this deep dive into Queen Victoria's life and legacy, don't forget to follow us, subscribe, and click the notification bell on our channel to stay updated with more epic tales of history. Your journey into the past has just begun. Stay tuned for more.